turn on captions. And again, folks, you can either, with this small of a group, you can probably get Dan's attention by asking a question verbally. If you want to raise the hand under reactions, that's fine, and I'll, or Matt will see it, or Steve, of course, and others. If you would like, you can type questions in the chat. But I'll turn it over to Matt, and I'll ask for at least Dan and Peter, and perhaps Nisarg. Matt, if you could provide your background, and you're the show.
Excellent. So thank you, everybody. Welcome. As I say, I've heard a lot over the last few minutes about what you do, and I have not spoken much about what I do yet. So my name is Matt Wren. I am the co-founder, chief technology officer, and president of BUNDLAR. BUNDLAR is an augmented reality content management platform, which is a whole lot of words to say that we make it very easy for people who are non-technical to create and publish augmented reality. I apologize if I talk fast. I'll try to go a little bit slower. I'm used to having a very short amount of time to present a lot of information, so I tend to talk very quickly. But with that said, I have a long history in a couple of different industries, technology and edge technology in particular being one of them, basically developing or inventing technologies that didn't exist previously, as well as applying new solutions to technologies. So, you know, when I first started creating web content management systems back in the mid-90s, we didn't use the term content management systems for web. We called them distributed development environments, we called them distributed web environments, all sorts of other names. The term content management came about a little bit after I got started. But the first major one I built was with General Electric Medical Systems back in 1999. And so that was the first time I was doing content management. And that'll come into play as I talk more about what BUNDLAR is in augmented reality. But I've also got a very long background. I've been a VR enthusiast since the 90s. Back in the early 90s, there were these games. There was this thing called a virtuality pod, which is this really old school VR headset. And there was a big center in Chicago called the BattleTech Center that was down in North Pier, which was a big video game, which was effectively very early virtual reality gaming. You were sitting in a pod, you had multiple screens around you, and you were controlling this mech, and you had kind of a battle game going on. And I've been hooked on virtual reality and augmented reality since then. Most people think these are current new technologies. They're actually very old technologies. There's been versions of augmented reality going back to the 60s and before that even. There's been versions of virtual reality going back as early as there's been screens. And so those types of technologies are a big area for me. Of late, we're hearing a lot of fancy words like metaverse and VR workspaces and things like that. And there's all sorts of new hardware that is now, you know, what's nice now is that the technology is really starting to catch up with the vision that has been present for it for a lot of years. I don't know, there's an old movie I can think of called Lawnmower Man, which a lot of people, you know, there's old movies that people remember that are like VR movies, and Lawnmower Man is one that sticks in my brain. Another one was Disclosure, you know, which was or what's Disclosure? I think that was it. With Demi Moore and Michael Douglas. Anyway, yeah, I won't go into it. Yep. So these, you know, and it's funny, these are very early visions of virtual reality of what people thought it would be like. And what's funny is nowadays the VR is actually better in a lot of cases than what they envisioned. But I will bring up really quickly, you know, the purpose of this is not to teach you guys all about VR and AR, is to talk really briefly about, hey, how does this, you know, okay, these technologies are here, but what does it matter? And so first I'm going to differentiate between the two of them, between augmented reality and virtual reality. And what I'm going to demonstrate a little bit later is I'm going to take you into two virtual workspaces, your two virtual environments. Now, we are going to be doing this in two-dimensional space, essentially on a flat screen on my computer, but both of the environments that I'm going to enter, you can enter using a VR headset. And actually one of them is designed, and it's actually much easier to navigate and work through if you're in a VR headset than it is on the 2D screen, but I'll get to that when we get there. But what I want to talk about is, okay, here's what these technologies are, very high level, how they're different, what they're being used for, how this technology is actually being applied across a lot of different industries right now today. And what opportunities that brings with it, the fact that it is being applied. Then we're going to start to talk a little bit about virtual workspaces, because with this new term metaverse that a lot of people are talking about, and the concept of virtual spaces where people can meet to either for entertainment purposes, for collaboration, or honestly the one that interests me the most is to work, because I'm involved with an organization that does not have a physical office. They only have a virtual office, and we're going to actually go to that virtual office a little bit later today. In this call, we're going to go visit their office, but they don't actually have a physical office. All the people who work there work virtually, and this is oddly enough an events company. So if you think about the fact that there's actually an events company that does not have a physical presence and only has virtual presence, because for the last 2 years, almost all events have been mostly virtual. But it's funny, because what we've learned about that is that provides a lot of capabilities and a lot of opportunities that get overlooked in other circumstances. We were talking earlier about, how Steve had mentioned, okay, dilapidated sidewalks. If you have physical restrictions, sometimes it's very hard to get to or get around a physical event. But if that event is held in a virtual space, and even if you don't have limitations to your physical abilities, even if it's just, hey, I just can't get there, it's too far away, I can't, travel that far today. Like, these are the types of things that having virtual components to these events, they allow the expansion of the event beyond its own physical limitations. So, it's a way to start to think about what are the actual capabilities that these technologies allow for. So I'll go into that a little bit. But first, let's talk about AR versus VR. And so I'm going to share my screen just briefly, and I'm going to show a presentation slide from my company just to do some demonstrations of augmented reality. And what we're looking at here, and there's on the screen, this is something we talk about when we talk about augmented reality. So augmented reality, as a very simple definition, is placing digital information within the context of your physical space, your physical presence. And most people, when we start talking about augmented reality, virtual reality, who've heard those terms, they think 3D. Everybody always thinks 3D stuff. But it's any digital information. It can be images, it can be videos, it can definitely be 3D. It can be 3D models, but it can just be audio. You can just have, augmented reality as audio, as music that is playing tied to a geographic location or to a physical marker in space. It can be text. It can be a combination of each of these things. You can have images that are buttons that you press and they're interactive. There's all sorts of things that can be the data that gets displayed within the context of your physical space. And that is basically the definition of augmented reality. You're taking physical reality, your reality, and you're augmenting it with digital information. There's also lots of ways to trigger the things that will show up. So it can be recognizing your location, it can be recognizing a specific image, it can be recognizing a certain object, it can be recognizing just your floor or your wall. But there's lots of different ways to trigger it. But again, the simplest definition of augmented reality is digital information within the context of your physical space. Now, to contrast that, we'll talk about virtual. And I'm trying to get out of that and show you a virtual space, like AltSpace here. And I'll go into this again in a moment. But what I wanted to show you is, this is essentially, it looks like a video game environment, but this is a full 3D environment. And this environment is actually designed to be experienced using virtual reality goggles and glasses. I can play it on my computer on a 2D screen, but it's really designed to be, you enter this space in VR using a VR headset. And I can, if I had a VR headset, you'd be able to see my hands and I would be able to walk around the space and physically interact with the objects in this space too. But I'm using a computer mouse, so I don't have quite as much. But I'll walk around that in a little bit and show you some more. But that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to always differentiate between VR and AR. VR is an environment, a virtual environment that the viewer kind of enters, whereas augmented reality is taking digital information and adding it to your space around you. And the most common way that AR is actually experienced is on mobile devices. A lot of people, we think about the Microsoft HoloLens and AR goggles and glasses and things like that, but realistically, the most common way people experience AR is just using a mobile device. So that's those two things. Let's talk about why this matters and how it's being applied across a lot of industries. And what I'll start with there is kind of a couple of the biggest drivers and the biggest adopters for virtual technology right now are education, healthcare, manufacturing, the military, and marketing and communications are always big ones. So, there's marketing and communications, anything that is new and cool and technology based, they love to play with new technology. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but they're definitely a rapid adopter of things like augmented reality. And video gaming, we all know video gaming is a big driver of technology. But in terms of, again, for more business use cases, industrial use cases, the question always comes up like, well, where are the jobs here? Like, what opportunity does this present? Because I realize that this group, based on your introductions a little bit earlier, we're all very technical here. A lot of developers, a lot of people who've worked in tech. And frankly, a lot of people who've worked in tech, those are the people who approach these technologies because they're like, oh, it's cool new technology. There's going to be lots of technology opportunities here. There's a huge marketing opportunity here for people who can take very technical subjects and make them accessible to people who are not the most technically minded. There's, sales needs, there's graphics, there's all sorts of creative tools. There's honestly usability, heuristics, accessibility, design, just user-centered design work. We're dealing with computer interfaces that are non-traditional. You don't have a keyboard in VR, or if you do, it's a very different way of using it than it would be a traditional physical keyboard. So when you start to think about what these technologies present and how they can be used, there's all sorts of ways. So I will say one of the biggest drivers across several industries, because you always talk about, industry verticals, and then you talk about horizontals. Probably the biggest horizontal for both virtual reality and augmented reality across all industries is education. People using immersive technology for training purposes, for kind of field support and performance support purposes, that would be across all the industries that it's being adopted, the most common kind of vertical that it's being applied to. Marketing is another one. Marketing and advertising are definitely there. But I would say the biggest driver there is definitely educational purposes. So if you think about, I'm going to throw a hypothetical at you guys. If you want to train somebody in a relatively realistic environment, how to react to a chemical spill that is dangerous, but without putting them in danger. You can present that using virtual reality. And as much as people talk about like the ability to do that, to put someone in what would be a dangerous situation, I spoke with a medical professional. There's an event that I host called VR Air Chicago, where I had a medical professional who was explaining to me, he's like, one of the best things that we have with VR training is the ability to train people what happens when you make a mistake, what happens when you fail. Because in the medical profession, you never want to fail on purpose to see what happens. You can't do that. It's very, very dangerous. And even if you were going to do it in a controlled environment, it's very expensive, where you're not actually hurting somebody. But in VR, they can train people, hey, listen, if you mess up, this is what it's going to look like. And so you need to know, kind of the starting point of what it looks like when you mess up. He was talking specifically about, I believe, like knee replacement surgery in that particular use case. And so it's neat that they can have, VR presents all these abilities to train people in situations that are very, very hard to train otherwise. Same goes with augmented reality. We were talking earlier with an automotive company, and how do you train 500 people who are distributed all around the country about doing some very physical work on something like an engine block. And if you have an engine block, it's okay, well, normally the way you would train people is you bring them all around a physical engine block and then you show them procedure on the block. Well, if they're all distributed all over the country, you can't just, ship a 1,000-pound engine block across the country to them, but you can use augmented reality in the circumstance to have a physical presence of the engine block in their space and give them access to it. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I did want to definitely touch the subject and breach on the subject of saying, okay, how is this technology actually being used and how are other industries applying it? And ultimately what I'll do in a little bit is I'll open it up to questions. If you guys want to throw an industry at me, I can definitely come back at you with some of the VR and AR use cases that I've seen applied already. Beyond that, the other thing I do want to talk about, because it was very timely in relation to the pandemic, and now that we're coming out of the pandemic, there's one thing that a lot of people have learned, which is that, hey, there's this technology, and everybody had to sort of stop getting together physically, and so we jumped to environments like Microsoft Teams and like Zoom and webinar systems and virtual environments, and we started working in those environments to collaborate. But now that the pandemic's kind of, pulling back and people can get back to physical interaction and getting together physically, there were some benefits to all these virtual spaces. There were some ways to do things there that were frankly better than the physical reality that we've done, dealt with in the past. There's things we learned. We don't want to go back 100% physical. We want to keep the other tools that have now been made available. So what I wanted to talk about with virtual workspace, and again, how that is being used. So I showed you one example of virtual workspace. I'll show you some others in a moment, and I'm going to walk you in depth through a couple of them and just show the features of them and why it's important. With virtual workspace, again, we spoke earlier about the fact that sometimes physical environments are limiting when it comes to meetings or events or frankly just a workspace. If I'm in a room that doesn't have a whiteboard, if I'm in a room where I need to be able to share video, obviously if you're doing those things in the physical world, there's physical requirements there. I have to have a giant video screen or I have to have a physical whiteboard. But in virtual spaces, sometimes they don't have to be there physically. The software allows for you to have the same capabilities and the same features and the same functions without ever actually being in a physical space together. In addition to that, when you're having a physical meeting and you want to have 25 people there live, again, we can use video chat. We're currently all on Teams together. But sometimes, I don't know how you guys are. I don't want to be on camera all day, every day. And, there's actually documented the term Zoom fatigue came up of people who were constantly in meetings where we're on Zoom for 8 hours a day, realizing that a camera is constantly on you. That can be taxing. That can be very tiring. And so even just a simple change of being online and being in meetings, but having an avatar representing you instead of just your physical camera, that actually helps. And sometimes it helps people to pay attention even, as opposed to zoning out like they would on a Zoom call. So with that, I'm just going to stop kind of talking hypothetical, and I'm going to walk you through a couple of physical virtual workspaces. I know I say that. So the first one I'm going to show you, and this is one that I alluded to it, but for those of us who work in AR and VR, I like to say we need to eat our own dog food a little bit more. We need to actually use the things that we talk about. So what I'm going to show you is I'm going to share my screen here.
And Matt, again, if you'd be willing to be as descriptive as you can.
I will do that.
For Dan's sake. Thanks.
Yes, and I apologize, Dan. I'll go over this. I'll go over what was on the slide, but basically what was on the slide that I shared earlier was just several pictures of mobile devices that had different types of data being displayed on them in augmented reality. So the one had images, one had 3D models, one had a video. So that's what was on the other slide that I shared earlier when I was talking about augmented reality. But what everybody else is seeing right now is we're looking at an avatar of me. Here, let me turn around and I'll show you me. So we're going to see an avatar. And those of you who are able to see me on camera, you guys can at least, you can see that actually looks a little bit like me. I made the avatar look like me as much as I could. And we're in what appears to be an office space. And in this office, Sorry, I need to not look at me now because otherwise I'm navigating backwards. So we're in an office space. There's, there's gray walls. There's a wood floor. There looks like a carpeted reception area. Behind the carpeted reception area is a big logo that says VRAR Chicago, which is, again, an organization. It's an event series that I founded back in 2017. And that is now actually supporting other organizations that are trying to host virtual events and, deal with event planning and using immersive technologies. We also have office space here for some of our sponsors and some of our partners. So 1871 and the CEO, Betsy Ziegler, she has an office in our virtual office. Actually, 1871 has their own completely virtual campus. And I'll go to other areas in the campus in a moment. But what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at, if I look on the side walls away from the reception area, there's 3 private offices, 3 on each side. That look like, essentially, they look like a physical office. I can walk over to them, and when I enter one, in this one, I've got a desk, I've got 2 chairs, I've got 2 screens, one on each of the side walls, and I've got a picture on the back wall of the Chicago Loop, if you want to go look at it, which is a photograph that was taken by, it's actually got a title under it, Leo Macapagal, I believe. Macapagal. But what I wanted to talk about in this virtual work environment is, if I'm in a meeting in here, I'm having a conversation with a client, and I will try to go to the open campus in a moment and actually speak with somebody else in this virtual environment. But these screens are controllable. So I can click on one of these screens and I can change what's there. So I could go to the ITKAN website, or I could pull up a document. And so what you're looking at, is it itkan.org or .net?
Sorry, Matt, it's ITKAN WordPress, ITKAN .org.
Gotcha. So, that it? No, that's not it either. I'll find it in a moment.
Let me.
But that's okay. I'll pull it up on a different screen here in a second, and I'll find it. But ultimately, you can see what everyone else is seeing that I'm doing is I've clicked on one of the screens, and I'm changing what is on the screen just by entering in a control that I have down on the bottom right here. And
Dan,
there we go.
it's itkan.wordpress.com.
There we go. I'll find it now.
Pardon me.
That's okay. Thank you for the help. I should have set this up ahead of time. But what I can do here is I can pull up the ITKAN website and I can scroll it in this virtual space. So I could visit websites. I could pull up, if I want to go pull up BUNDLAR's website, I can do that too.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And I'll show you one other thing I can do here in a second. Now, again, I will preface this with, I think this will work. I don't know if this will work just because I have I can turn my camera off here. And you guys are all able to see my virtual environment. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and turn my camera on there. And instead of seeing me, it's not going to work because Teams currently has my camera locked up, I think. Oh, no, there I am. So, if we want to talk about how sort of weird this is from a meta perspective, I've got the avatar of me that you guys are all watching through the screen share right now, projected on the screen in my virtual space. So
that's very cool.
That's one of the ways that this stuff can work. And I can play videos up there. I can put documents up there. There's all sorts of things I can put up there. And I have live control of it just using this little control panel on the bottom of the screen. And so, but now again, this is useful. I'm just walking around now, but think about collaboratively working. I'm going to walk around this workspace and I'll do a quick tour of this office because this is a very big office. There's lots of these screens all over the place. You'll also notice that if I look around the walls in the office that I have art. And these are art that we have permission to have up here, but these are all Chicago artists that one of my partners with VR Air Chicago is a guy named Tom Packard. This is his office next to mine. And he's very tied in with Chicago art community. So he got permission from a lot of the artists he knows to actually take their art and display it in our office, because this is VRAR Chicago's only office. And it has been for the last, since the organization officially founded, which was early 2020, actually 2019. The event series founded in 2017, but it became a corporation. Actually, it became a corporation at that point too. It was a sub corporation of one of my other companies. But we never had an office until 2020, and when we did, the first office we had is what we're looking at right here in Verbella. So we can see, again, there's the offices over here to the right. And if I walk past the reception area, there's kind of like a little loungy area with another screen. And I'm gonna describe that. You guys can see, if I look at the floor, these sort of like blue glowing halos. And as I go into these, because they have a function, you'll also notice that these blue halos exist in all the doors of the offices. And I don't know if you'll hear it, but I'll be quiet when I walk into the space. And do you guys hear that little ding that happens, or do only I hear it?
I walk out again, Dan or Matt.
I'll walk back in, and there's a little ding.
Mm,
It might not be shared. The audio might not be shared. But there's a little ding that I get to hear. And what this blue halo indicates is this indicates what's called a private space. So if I'm in this space, I only can hear and talk to the other people that are inside this space with me. But if I'm outside it, I can hear and talk to the people who are outside it. And so I'm going to walk around. Now, again, how I'm walking around, just so you all know, is I'm using the mouse to kind of guide which way I'm looking sometimes. But I'm using the WASD keys on my keyboard to just walk around. And again, I want to show you some of the other space. So we've got, once I get past the offices, there's some more art, and there's these little workstations that have computer screens. So if two of us wanted to sit here and work on a computer collaboratively, we could.
Camera button to activate, press space bar. Video is on.
What's that?
Oh, nothing. I had a Jaws profit.
Oh, your video is off.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Sorry, I'm trying to. Never mind.
Mute button to activate, press
I'm
space bar.
having a.
That's okay. But the other thing I wanted to walk by and show is over here. And again, as I walk farther in the office, there's some more sitting and working spaces, and there's some more screens. There's other offices back here. My company, BUNDLAR, has an office in this office. So I've held meetings here. And we also have this very big conference office, this conference room over here. And I'll show you again some of the features. And the reason I like to talk about this is, as I go into this office here, you can see that there are multiple screens. I've got a screen there, I've got a screen there, I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 6 screens in this room. And so, if you were going to be having a meeting where you have to display lots and lots of information and work collaboratively with people, even if you were going to do that in a physical office where you're all working together, sometimes you just don't have that many screens that people could collaboratively work on. But in a virtual space, I can just have several of them. The other thing I want to point out, which is neat about this space, is we can see that as I look around this gigantic room with a lot of screens, there's what look to be 4 conference tables. And if I don't want to have that layout and I want to just change the layout, I'm going to have it be one gigantic table in the center of the room. And if I click a control, now I've got one single table that's got about 25 seats around it. Or I can change it again to, like a classroom style layout. In
Matt,
this case, yes.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
What are any restricted parameters or is there any restriction on the number of avatars that can engage in, for example, this office setting?
Yes. So, well, on this particular office, because this is our office and we have accounts, this is what we're looking at here. Is we're looking at a virtual environment called Verbella. This is software called Verbella. And we pay them. We rent this space from them. So we do have an account that allows us to have this office space, and our office has a limit on the number of people that it can have in it. I believe we're there's 10 of us who can kind of have office space here and just enter on our own and be able to change the environment. But I think we're allowed to have up to 100 people in the space. And other than the 10 named people, the rest of the people can't really change. Like they can't, I can make these I can change what's on the screens. I can make the screens go away. So I'll hide this one right now. If I press this little button, you'll see the screen goes away. So you can see how I can like control the environment, and I can change the seating layouts. As a user of the space that's a named user, I can control those things, but anybody that comes in the space as a guest, I have to kind of go to a control panel if I want to give them that type of control. So only those of us with the right privileges can modify the space.
So there are obviously guardrails.
Yes.
And who designed this space?
So the main layout of the actual office, so the kind of office template here of the conference room back that I just walked out of, and these offices here, the actual layout of the space comes from this company that, again, as I look up, you can see their logo on the ceiling, Verbella. Now, I'm pretty sure I can click that and change it if I wanted to, but I don't mind leaving it up there. So Verbella is the company. They laid out this office, and I'm going to actually walk out of the office in a moment and show you more of the campus. But this particular office, while they laid it out, it was my team that went and decided what art to put up on the walls and where. We put our logo all over the place. We put our names up on the offices, things like that. So it's definitely very customizable, but again, we control who can do the customization. So as I walk over to the 1871 office, you can tell it's the 1871 office because there's a giant 1871 logo on the window.
So I'm thinking of various disabilities. For example, might someone with vision loss or blindness have a haptic prompt or somehow be able to navigate effectively and engage with colleagues effectively, or at a conference utilizing again feedback, haptic or otherwise, to engage productively.
Gotcha. I'm gonna go with and I can't remember. Apologize, I can't remember which of you was talking earlier about having a Braille terminal, and I'm curious how this would work with a Braille terminal, because as you can see up in the top left here, there's a menu system. So as I'm walking around right now, I'm doing it like I would do it visually, where I see where I want to go and I walk there. But if I wanted to engage with a colleague, if other people who are in the space, their name will be listed here if they were in the office with us. So I could just use the menu system and say, go to this person or go to that person. And I'm assuming that would match in with like a Braille interface, but I honestly, I don't know that technology very well.
Yeah.
How are you manipulating?
And again, and pardon me, Dan, Matt, this is Dan Taveldi's expertise.
Okay.
I mean, one of the big problems with with computer interfaces for someone who's totally blind is, am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Oh, in Braille it says unmute. See, this meeting keeps refreshing. I don't know what's going on with Teams, but it's saying on my Braille display, unmute me anyway. One of the problems is that the ways most people interact with websites and applications are not accessible. A blind person cannot use a mouse. A blind person cannot, listening to the information around, or even reading, Braille in its present form is limited because it's just character based. We have graphics displays emerging that would display pictures, but they're not here yet. And the devices are very expensive because this is such a new technology, but there is a potential of haptics. We use haptics on our phones when we know the phone starts or we know there's an image, and What I think needs to, but even beyond that, what needs to happen is how are these virtual reality constructs going to communicate with a screen reader? I mean, there's no one even thinking about this. I mean,
Oh
everyone,
yeah, they are. They absolutely are.
whereas I'd like to get involved because I do not see anything in all the sources I know about accessibility of what people are doing with virtual reality. People talk about it, but as far as I can, from what I've read and I've talked to people, that everyone knows it's an issue, but no one knows how to solve it yet. I went to a conference last year, and one of the presenters basically said that the traditional keyboard, navigation with keyboard and magnification and braille displays is just not sufficient for the future. So if someone is working on this problem, I'd like to know who and how, because I certainly have a lot of ideas of what needs to be done.
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest group that I would think of that is definitely, and again, I know that there are people talking about this because I've been involved in some of the conversations. Open XR initiative is probably the biggest one that is really, I mean, they are thinking about the application and what needs to go into these technologies from everything you can think of. That's the one that I know definitely has a huge number of people talking about accessibility factors. They also have a very big organization there that is looking into, safety and security.
That's a big issue too.
Yeah, social safety and security, things like that. And so, yeah, these are issues. The nice thing I will say about the XR community in general is that is these issues, and I'll be the first to say, yes, they're not all solved. There are not solutions for everything yet, but it is a topic that has been brought up from day one. And everybody is thinking about it and trying to figure out how to resolve for it.
Because the companies that are out there, I mean, the companies that have been the most successful as far as accessibility have been Microsoft, Apple, and Google, because they have the resources to create a screen reading solution which a person doesn't have to purchase. I mean, we have screen readers you can buy, but I really think a screen reader that you have to pay for is on its way out. I really do.
Yeah, and I mean, to a certain degree, like this is one of the things, because you brought up haptics, and I'll bring that up because again, haptics it's as keeping in mind the limitations of what I'm presenting and how I'm presenting it right now. I'm presenting information through a screen share of a 2D environment that represents a 3D environment. If I was actually in VR, the things that I will say that are happening in VR now, much like anything else, when we start talking about using a VR headset and actually, using the hand controllers and the VR headset, the audio in that environment is spatial. If something is happening off in front of me to the right, I hear it off in front of me to the right. And whether or not I can see where I'm going, I would use the controls to navigate to that direction the same way I would, whether or not I'm seeing it. So the haptics there can indicate that you've had a collision or something like that. And you're not going to see, if you can't see, then obviously you cannot see what's in that environment, but you will definitely hear things spatially, and you will have the same controls as a person who could have the same abilities.
Well, hearing is okay unless you're deaf-blind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is, this is where a lot of these problems come into play. It is very hard to solve a problem in the virtual world that hasn't necessarily been solved in the physical world either.
Right. Great
I mean,
point.
what we really
need. Go ahead, Dan, please.
What we really need, and I won't belabor it, Matt, is we really need types of controller devices that we could use to manipulate computers like a sighted person uses a mouse. I mean, the memorizing keyboard commands to do different things in operating system or even touch screen gestures is a huge cognitive load. I mean, JAWS, in addition to Windows keyboard commands, I think JAWS has about 400 commands to operate the screen reader. That's a lot to memorize.
Oh,
And we need a more intuitive approach. And iOS and Android address that to an extent by exploring by touch and feeling haptics, but we really don't have as good an implementation of that in Windows because the implementation in Windows isn't standard. Each screen reader does things differently, whether it's narrator or JAWS or NVDA.
And again, these are, like I said, the solution. I will obviously the solutions are not there. Like they're you know, these problems are not all solved. It's also important to keep in mind that this technology is in the stage that it's coming right now. It is evolving very, very, very fast.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there are a lot of people, myself included, who are on what I would call kind of the leading or bleeding edge of the tech. But we are literally trying to invent new ways to make this stuff work that it has never worked before. And while we're definitely considering and thinking about, okay, as I'm doing this, how are we going to plug in, you know, for how are we going to use this as an accessibility, you know, how are we going to make this accessible? The features that we're adding, and more to the point, are the features that we're adding, you know, do they create an accessibility problem, or honestly, do they present an accessibility solution? Which is one of the things that augmented reality definitely does. With augmented reality, you can pinch to zoom. You can, you know, so a lot of the things we were talking about magnification, there's stuff like that that you can build in that would be very hard to do with the actual physical world. So you can, you know, you can almost integrate a pinch to zoom magnifier. Or you can have something so that if you touch it, it plays sound to describe what it is, or it opens text, or it all depends. There's lots of different types of, you know, accessibility concerns. I can see right now that Steve is typing about things like mobility issues or the ability to use a keyboard, a mouse, and a microphone.
Yeah, that's a very real problem.
And that's, you know.
And Matt, would you be willing, or may perhaps Steve and Dan follow up with you to stay engaged?
Absolutely.
Or be
Yeah, I would like that,
into
because
the community.
Absolutely.
I don't think the traditional channels are really productive, like the assistive technology companies. They're not going to do anything. They don't have the resources.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a giant effort. So OpenXR initiative is a very big, I mean, OpenXR initiative has everybody from individual developers up to the people who are developing from Google. I mean, it's a very large community of people across the whole spectrum, but we're all, you know, we're all very invested in this technology.
Right.
I'm also currently involved. I don't know if you guys know who UL is, Underwriters Laboratories.
Yes, I've heard of them. I've heard of them.
So I'm on a panel with UL that is currently writing the safety rules, like the actual safety, what's going to be called the 8400 standard, the safety standard for AR and VR equipment. And I will tell you right now, accessibility is one of the big topics that we have been talking about and bringing up constantly.
That's great.
Because yeah, it's you know, this is a technology that's going to change the way, like, this is a very, very rapidly adopting and very rapidly evolving technology. It's like web in the 90s. You know, we don't really know how fast it's going to go.
I mean, I think it's promising. I mean, what I would like to do is get my hands on devices, review them, and write about them. I've done that now. I've written at least one blog entry for my company.
So, Matt, again, you're open to Steve and Dan following up.
Absolutely.
And being engaged. So thanks so much. I see Steve has a very interesting, from my perspective, question in the chat. I assume you can lock offices so only invited people can view and hear the contents of a meeting.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll show you right now. I'm going to walk in my office here. Now, even the other administrators of this office, if I go in here and I close the door, no one else can come in.
I love it.
And I can unlock the door.
This is intriguing.
And so now, again, this is just one virtual office within a virtual campus. So what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to go show you some other spaces within this virtual campus by walking out the door. And if I walk out the door here, this is a very big virtual campus. And I'm in what looks like, I would say, either a corporate campus or a college campus, where, if, you know, when I go to the entry area, as I walk around, there's a bulletin board here, there's some flowers, there's an office space over here, a welcome desk. There's kind of a little meeting area. There's a big information booth over to the right. There's a giant expo hall up here. There's a big auditorium, 2 office buildings. You know, as I'm just looking around the campus, and I'm gonna run in a second here in the space, and I'm gonna make myself run. And as I run, I'm gonna run over to what is a soccer field in this space. Oh, and here's now, again, I don't know how well the audio is sharing, but I see 2 other people who are here, 2 other avatars. I'm gonna walk up and talk to them really quickly. They're in a private volume, actually, so I'm not going to, because they're both from JVC. And you'll notice that even though I'm standing right by them, I can't hear them. And the reason I can't hear them is because they're inside that blue circle, which is a private volume. But because they're in there, I also don't want to interrupt them, so I'm not going to walk in there with them.
Sure.
But I can run through this space. There's this, you know, I'm running up basically what looks like a giant mountain, almost a staircase, and I found a soccer field up here. If I run up to the soccer field, I will be able to kick the soccer ball.
I love it.
And, you know, somewhere else over here, there's an auditorium, there's a beach. They have all these, there's a lighthouse. I don't actually remember ever seeing the lighthouse before, honestly. But I can run down to a beach area, and it looks like there's a little concert venue, a stage set up. But I could also, and this is what I'll do here, is I'm going to, instead of actually using, you know, the WSD keys to walk around, I can also go use the menu, and I can just say, go to, we'll go to the campus location, we'll go to the theater. There's auditorium. And when I walk into this auditorium space, as I enter it now, I'm up on a stage, there's 3 screens behind me, and there's a whole big auditorium space with a lot of seating. So you can have a whole, you know, to your question, Pat, you can have a whole lot of virtual people in these events. They've had an event here with over 1,000 people in it. And so it is possible to have a large virtual audience.
Yeah, this is really more engaging, even seeing it in a 2D environment than I would have thought.
And so the last thing I'll say about this space before I show you the next space, because I know I want to be conscious of time here. The last thing I'll say about this space is Virbela is owned by a company called eXp Realty. eXp Realty is one of the fastest growing real estate companies in the world right now. They have that entire organization has no physical office. Their entire office is done within Virbela environment like this. They have their own private version of it, but that's it. That's what they use for their office space. The company Virbela, this is their office. They have no physical office. So the company that actually makes this software. And I've got all sorts of features in here too. So you know how you have the raise hand feature in Teams, I have a raise hand feature here where I can raise hands. So what's neat, there's all sorts of tools in here for presentations, for doing, you know, for if you're going to have a meeting, if you're going to have a presentation, if you're going to have a social event, there's all sorts of little tools in here that are built in that start to kind of replicate what can happen in a physical environment. Now, the last thing I'll say about this space to differentiate from the next one I'm going to show you is this space is, I can enter this space using virtual reality. I could put on a set of VR headset and gloves, you know, the controllers, and I could walk around the space using that technology, but it was definitely designed to be accessed 2D, like I'm accessing it now.
Right.
Now, I'm going to contrast that with this next one I'm going to show you, which is called Alt Space. And Alt Space is a lot, you'll notice it's kind of harder for me to get around in 2D because this one is actually designed initially to be 3D. So it's very similar. I'm going to go see if there's a mirror so I can show you what my avatar looks like here. Or actually, I can use one of the controls and take a selfie. There, where's the selfie camera? There it is. So it's going to take a selfie of me in a moment, and you'll see what my avatar looks like in this space. And there I am. Again, kind of looks like me.
Yeah.
But you can tell that this room looks a little bit like, you know, kind of a bar / concert venue. So I mean, it's a little bit more cartoony looking than Verbella, but there's trees, there's a little bar out here. And as I walk in, you know, got the velvet ropes, and I can walk in a little entryway, and there's what looks like a coat check desk. And then I walk in, and on my right, I've got a bar. And on my left, I've got a theater, you know, a stage and some seats and a big sort of like dance floor area. You know, now granted, I'm in a private room right now, so there's nobody else in here with me. But when I leave this room, which I'm going to do in a moment, there's going to be lots of other avatars, and there's going to be other people who are in this virtual space. And I'm going to apologize to them because I'm talking to you. I'm not really going to talk to them, but they'll be able to hear me because they'll have the microphone on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go to a different space. And I'm going to go to one of the, let's go home space. I will go to campfire. And so when I go into this space, when I teleport kind of to this new space, it's loading the environment right now. I'm going to try to keep hearing you guys and keep talking without the distraction. But there's a lot of other people in here. There's a lot of other avatars, and they're actually just walking around the space and talking in groups. This is a whole group up here. And I don't know how loud it is for you guys, but it's very loud for me because I'm hearing them all.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, we're not hearing a thing.
That's okay. I'm hearing them all talking, so it's very distracting to try and, you know, tell if it's you guys or them. But they have these signs up, and this campfire area is kind of it's an area for people to sort of learn how to use Verbella. So there's all these little tutorials around the space. But it's, you know, it's like an open campfire, and there's these other avatars. These are other people that are in this virtual space, and the vast majority of them are using VR headsets, because this environment was designed more to be accessed by a headset versus 2D computer. And it's ultimately, it's a lot easier to get around if you're doing it by that too. But what's that? Somebody just threw something and I saw it land over here. You can see what's over here. You know, somebody picked up a globe and threw it in the fire. And so, you know, there are like meetings and discussions that go on in here. There are, if I go back to the menu, you can look at an entire schedule and events that are all taking place right now and how many people are in them. So there's people in the campfire. There's this one called Live and Local, which is probably music. Cornerstone Life, which is a discussion, I would imagine. Mall of the Metaverse, which is a presenter. So that, you know, presented talk, it's got one person in it. This one has 21 people in it. This one has 30 people in it. So there's all these different places that you can go, all these different virtual spaces.
Matt,
yes.
In the campfire space, the avatars appeared to be kind of floating, almost. Yes. Is that because it's intended to be viewed within 3D environment?
So there's a couple of reasons for that, actually, and this gets down to, again, a lot of the things that people learn as they're using virtual and augmented reality. We found that with virtual reality, when you're doing what I'm doing here, which is that you're moving, if you have a VR headset, your body and your legs, your brain, for people who can walk, your brain is used to your legs moving when you do this. And so you get a little bit of motion sickness or dizziness sometimes when you're not doing it. And the dizziness tends to be worse if you have virtual legs that are not doing what you expect your physical legs to be doing. So a lot of the times in virtual environments, when you don't see avatars that have legs, it's because that's a motion sickness solution.
Got it.
And I can see this guy's kind of following me around here. But this is, so, you know, the contrast that I'll make between this environment and the other one that we were in, this one is a VR first environment. It was meant to be experienced using VR hardware, and it has a 2D availability to it, but it was designed from the start to be VR. Whereas the other one was designed to be 2D, but you can access it in 3D. But a lot of the same features exist. There are screens in here that I can manipulate. Here, I'll try and go back to my home environment, see if I can bring my camera up on a screen.
And Matt, Nisarg has a question.
Sure.
Not really a question, but I saw some basketballs and a hoop behind you. Can you show how you throw?
No, I'm not very good.
Oh, the balls aren't decreasing.
Yeah, they don't really go away. Trying to take a
Yeah.
shot here. But yeah, so it's actually easier. This is easier to do if I have actual, a VR headset and controllers as opposed to a mouse and a keyboard. But they have it.
Thank you.
And so, one of the things that I think is really funny, because as somebody who's been using this technology for a long time, and I've been playing with this technology, and I've had someone ask me before, it's like, well, it's not like you can actually do business in these spaces. And I explain to people, I'm like, well, my company, Bundle AR, the first time that I talked about starting that company with my business partner, we actually did it in Altspace. We were meeting together in Altspace. We were playing Ultimate Frisbee in this environment right here. And we were having the discussion about whether or not we should start the company, which then became Bundle AR. So that company actually was originally founded in a virtual reality environment.
Man,
As silly as that sounds to some people.
no, it doesn't. Peter, do you have any questions or thoughts on the environments or related?
Nothing at the moment, but I definitely have a bunch of new tabs open in my browser after seeing all the different technologies named here.
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to make sure you knew you could ask or comment, of course.
So, one question that does come to mind, and full disclosure, guys, now that I'm off mute, you may hear my infant son in the background. He's just over 1 month
Worries.
old. So
No worries, Peter.
I apologize in advance if you hear any random grunting or crying. But
That's
so
okay.
one question that comes to mind is, in my recent work in the cloud ecosystem, right? There's a huge amount of thought that's gone into the pros and cons of doing things in a SaaS way, doing things in a multi-cloud way, doing things in a self-hosted or co-located way. How do those kinds of ways of framing enterprise software map onto this world of AR VR stuff? Like is there like a kind of like a household name for like a host your own VR experience, or are players in that field not really well established yet?
So there was an initiative, which I don't know how much, I know it's still available, but I don't know how much it's used right now. There's a web-based VR environment. Actually, I can pull it up. I'll show you guys a third environment. I didn't even think to do this. So let me open up a browser real fast, and I'll see if I can go to Mozilla Hubs. So this is a third virtual environment. And I'm gonna, you see that I pressed a button just now to create a room. So this, the room that I'm creating, and you guys can join me on this browser tab, by the way, also. So if you have a web browser open and you want to just join in, I'm going to use my microphone. Oh, wow, I'm going to be echoing. So if you do come in here, please don't talk too much. So this is a virtual environment called Hubs, which is browser based, and I just joined it. and it's a 3D and VR environment. Now, the other thing about this that I'll say is this environment is actually designed to be headset, even though it's browser based, it's designed VR first. So it was meant to be experienced in VR, not in 2D, but it is obviously web browser based. What I can do is I can put up the share code.
Cool.
Hang on a sec. I'm trying to think of how I invite people to the space. There's a way to do this. Sorry, I have not used this tech in a while. Invite, there we go.
Yeah, it prompts me
So-
for like a entry code or something.
Yeah, so what I can do here though is I'll go into the chat. Where is it? Right there. And I'll paste this URL. And if I paste this URL, I'm pretty sure anyone that clicks on that URL, you guys are going to join me in here.
All right, here goes nothing.
All right, hey, there we go. I see now. You can see that I have a name because I've actually logged into Mozilla Hubs before, so it calls me Matt. But you're in here as Paradise Shellduck.
Now, can we join if we haven't created an avatar?
Yes, if anyone who goes to that URL, it'll just bring you into the room. And now I have to find where you went though, because you're in here somewhere, but I don't know exactly where. And I hear more and more of you coming in.
Loading.
Oh, there's someone. I see one of you here.
I think the first thing I need to do is set up the WASD keys to behave like a first-person shooter.
Yep, and I need to mute you because I'm hearing you echo both through Teams and through the environment. So I just muted myself. You know, now I've got my microphone running through the environment as well, but I'm going to mute myself there so I can keep talking on Microsoft Teams. But, you know, as you were saying, like, is there a roll your own environment? Yes, there's this one here. There's another one I can show you, which if you watch back on Teams, Frame VR is another one. Now this Frame is owned, hearing myself echo. Frame is owned by Verbella. But you can see, again, this is a browser-based environment, but it's fully virtual environment, and I didn't open any software. I just went to a browser to get to this. And I see Peter, and I know Peter can see me. There's someone else in here too. A cow duck.
Yeah, I think
there is.
I'm in there.
Yeah, so if you guys want to play along, this is the way to play along. But these are just environments that you can go to and use. Obviously, there was no cost. There was nothing to download. So Mozilla Hubs is and Mozilla Hubs is open source. So if you're a developer, you can actually come in and like customize these environments. You got to learn a little bit to do so, but you can definitely do it. You know, another neat fact was that the guy who was in charge of this project was actually based in Chicago for a long time. He's no longer there, unfortunately, but I think he works with either Niantic or Facebook now. I'm not entirely sure. But I'm going to get out of this environment because I'm hearing echoes. So I'll get out of that environment. I'll go back to alt space here since I'm kind of just sitting in a public space, not doing anything. But yeah, at this point, I'm just, you know, any questions I can answer, let me know. I'm happy to answer. Talk about any other stuff here. These are the virtual environments I wanted to just show to see these, to be able to understand that these are some of the things that you could do. And I'm going to stop screen sharing because I haven't seen any of you in a while. And now I'm back to seeing you. My camera should be able to come back on now. There we go. I think maybe. There we go.
This was
Definitely
great,
pretty cool.
Matt. I was really engaged with the first environment. It impressed upon me, and I have a friend, Todd Nilsson, in the Wisconsin area, Two Rivers. But Todd's always former colleague. He's currently very engaged in digital community building. And Todd is also big in VR environments. And he's had several podcasts or webcasts on this, but until this introduction, I never was that engaged. And I have to say, I now see the viability of really creating a work environment and collaborative environment. I'm impressed.
Well, and so now that you've seen that space, particularly the Verbella space is the one I'll bring up. So VRAR Chicago, I've been hosting a monthly event for 5 years. Okay. I hosted it for several years. We were at 1871 and we would have 100 people come to the 1871 auditorium and we would do a live panel and discuss VR and AR technology. And I did that for several years. But when the pandemic hit, we had 100 people. We had actually 120 people scheduled to be at 1871 on April 1st, 2020. March 20th, 2020, we were told, nope, everything's shutting down. We transitioned that event into these virtual environments. And so for the last 2 years, the monthly event series has still been going on. It just takes place in Verbella. And I've had a presenter from Spain. I've had a presenter from Australia. Sorry, not Australia, New Zealand. I've had a presenter from New Zealand. Actually, I did have one from Australia also. So I've had presenters from all over the world. The most recent event, I believe we had somebody from Belgium. And so like, you know, it is when you think about the fact that I was already hosting an event, but when you couldn't gather physically, we held this event. The event continued. It has been going on monthly, first Wednesday of every month. It always happens, and it happened unless there's a holiday and we move it. But it always happens, and now it happens in Verbella. And now that we're coming out of the pandemic, the biggest concern that a lot of our audience members had is, well, some of us aren't physically in Chicago, but we want to keep coming to the event. So how are we going to do that? And so we've already committed to the fact that the event will be simulcast in the virtual space and in physical location, and that we will have a way for the people who are there physically to interact with the people who are there virtually live.
Wow, that's cool.
Because you can do that. You saw what I did in Verbella. I brought my camera onto a screen. Well, I can have a camera in the physical space in front of a screen so that the people who walk up to it can talk right to the people who are in the virtual space live, just like we're doing here on Zoom.
That's very cool.
And it's definitely, you know, it's not the same as being there physically. It never will be, but it's a very good representation and allows interaction that otherwise wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, Matt, as always, you've done a great job, and we thank you for your generosity of time and knowledge. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to ask or type them in chat. Otherwise, pardon me, I think I'll give you back 10 minutes of your life, Matt.
I put my LinkedIn profile in the chat just now. Feel free to reach out to me, connect with me if you haven't already. I was actually surprised, Pat. Apparently you and I weren't connected from the last event. We only just connected recently. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me, connect to me. Any questions, if there's anything I can do to help with this technology, to help with the space, answer questions. This technology is emerging. We are in, you know, again, for those of us who are old enough to remember this, the 1990s of web is happening right now when it comes to this technology. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of ways to get involved. There's certain things that are very, very easy to learn and pick up and yet very valuable as a skill. And I will say right now, you've seen these environments, 90% of the world has not. Like they don't even know this stuff exists. So
Yeah.
you're ahead of them, or just by watching us do this tonight, you're ahead of them in terms of the knowledge you have. You know that it's there. You can go learn more, and again, share that out. This is now knowledge and skill, and it can be used for business, and especially for those, we talk about accessibility. Yes, the people who are developing this technology, we need that help. We need to know what works, what doesn't. Get involved in OpenXR. We're looking like. The community is very, very actively looking for this.
Well, that's great, because I have a lot of experience with different types of hardware, and I have a lot of ideas about what could be done.
Yeah, that's if you're looking for the communities that are doing it, feel free to reach out to me. I will connect you directly with them, because I'm very well connected with most of them.
You have a email address? Because I don't know, LinkedIn is so cluttered.
Yeah, you can email me at matt@bundlear.com. I'll put that in there too.
Bundle AR.
I'm putting it in the chat right now.
BUNDLAR.
Oh, Bundler. Okay.
Yep, it's in the chat.
Actually, I'm not sure if I can get to the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, see,
Yeah, that's okay. Dan, it's Matt at BUNDLAR.com.
Okay, that's great. I'll send you. That's easy to remember. I can just send you a very brief 2-sentence email.
Works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my full-time job, my full-time job all day, every day, I am definitely working on the augmented reality company, but I do, for fun, I go play VR games, and I operate these VR environments. I had somebody several years ago, as I was in one of the early VR AR Chicago events, someone's like, it's not like you can do anything in VR. You couldn't host this event in VR. And I'm like, challenge accepted. The next month, I did not physically go to the event that I was hosting. I was actually presenting and hosting the event from my basement in VR, and I was on a screen in the physical lot. Like there were 25, 35 people at an event that I was hosting, but I wasn't there.
Wow.
Wow, that is interesting.
And so that's again, when you start to realize what can you really do with this tech, push the limits, push it. And there's questions I haven't thought of. There's things that we haven't asked yet that you're going to come up with, because this is emerging tech.
Yeah, this is putting guide dogs out of business. I work remotely, so I don't have a dog anymore.
No,
fun.
We miss Emerson, Dan.
Yeah, Emerson. I know. I would like to get another dog, but right now it just not a good time.
Yeah.
I foster dogs.
Again, Matt, thanks so much from all of us. And
thank you.
We've recorded, not that it will do justice, but at least we'll have access to that. And Dan and or Steve will follow up. And thanks again. Great job.
Pleasure. Absolutely, my pleasure. Feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for attending.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Oh, here we go.